Hello and welcome back. Today we are going to start to discuss the DBQ essay assignment. This is going to be probably the largest assignment that you have to do the entire semester, so it's going to be worth the most amount of points, with the exception of the portfolio, which is your final exam. This essay is actually going to, it's worth so many points, it's actually going to be graded twice. It gets graded once as a standalone essay assignment, and then it will be graded a second time as a portion of your portfolio that is going to be due as your final exam. So you're going to want to make sure you complete this assignment because it is worth so many points, and this is a class that's required for graduation, so we're going to want to make sure we get this done, and make sure that you, file it in your computer some way that you'll be able to access it later on, so it's just that much easier to make it a part of your final project. So what's going to happen is I'm posting this video for just instructional purposes to help you work through the DBQ, or the document-based question portion of the assignment. You're going to get a PDF file that's going to have this packet attached to it. So how democratic was Andrew Jackson? You are going to be writing a 5-paragraph essay about whether or not Andrew Jackson promoted the values of democracy, or whether or not he hindered the promotion of democracy in the United States. So did he help America become more democratic, or did he stop America from becoming more democratic? You're going to be writing an essay about that. You're going to pick one. You're either going to say, yes, Andrew Jackson helped America become a more democratic nation, or you're going to say, no, Andrew Jackson did not help America become a more democratic nation. So first thing we have to do, if that's going to be your thesis statement, the first thing we have to do is figure out, well, what did Andrew Jackson actually do? Well, all of that information is going to be in this document that is a PDF file attached to this same post. Within this packet, you're going to see a series of documents. They're going to look like this. And they're going to be labeled document A, document B, and I think it goes all the way through, let me look here, all the way through document O. So each one of these documents is a resource that's going to help you write this paper. The paper is going to be exclusively written from information that you find within this packet. So the first thing you're going to want to do is when you get this packet, there is an introductory article. So that's going to look like this. How democratic was Andrew Jackson? It'll be found on page, it says 105 down in the corner. You're going to want to read this 3-page article that will give you some background information on Andrew Jackson. There will also be Andrew Jackson lecture videos that you can, I would suggest that you listen to before you start writing this paper, so it can give you kind of an idea about who Jackson was, what his motivations were, why he did what he did. But for the essay, you're going to have to analyze these documents A through O. So those start on page 111 of the Jackson DBQ packet. So what you'll do is you'll read each document, starting with document A, and then you're going to fill out the Google Doc that is also attached to this post. So you'll have a document analysis sheet. There is one of these sections, so if you look here, this is where it says document letter or number, it says source, primary source or secondary source, main idea, and then is this document evidence that Andrew Jackson was democratic or undemocratic? You're going to fill out one of these for every single one of those documents A through O. This is going to just to help you organize the information, the evidence for whether he's democratic or not democratic. There is no right or wrong answer. It's your opinion. To be honest with you, he did some democratic things and he did some things that weren't so democratic. You're not going to be able to say that in the essay. You're going to have to pick one or the other. But it's going to be your opinion based on the evidence that you collect from this packet. So we're going to go over this together really quickly here. So we look at document A. So you should get out document A, print it out. If you can't print it out, just pay attention here, and you can go back and look at it later. So when we look at document A, it says methods of electing presidential electors 1816 through 1836, right? Then it's got this chart here with a list of states down here, and then a list of years, which is 1816, 1820, 1824, 1828, 1832, and 1836. The P's, then it's got a bunch of letters right here. The P's all stand for presidential electors being elected by the people. So the people get to select who is going to be the president. And the L right here, it stands for legislatures. That's the state legislatures that are going to essentially pick the president. So when we look at the chart, we got to just analyze it before we worry about figuring out what the document says. When we look at 1816, right, and we see the list of states right here, do we see a lot of L's in this column or a lot of P's? Well, when I'm looking at it, it's all L's, right? Which means the legislatures are essentially picking the president. Well, is that democratic or is that undemocratic? Well, if a democracy, right, and we got to define democracy, which is in the article, it's a government that's reflective of the will of the people, right? Is it, super democratic to have legislatures pick the president as opposed to the people? I would argue probably not. So in 1816, it looks like America's not very democratic. We're not allowing, the people to have a say in who elects the president. So let's look and see what happens in 1820. Well, in 1820, there's still a lot of L's, but I can see 1, 2, 3 P's. So more people are going to be involved in electing the president. There's still more L's than P's, right? So which means we're still probably, less democratic than we need to be, right? But we're becoming more democratic. Well, when we move to 1824, we see, looks like about half and half. Half of the states pick their president by the will of the people directly, and the other half pick it by the legislatures. Right? Then we move to 1828. This is going to be the year that Andrew Jackson gets elected. He almost got elected in 24, but he gets elected in 1828. That information is in your article. Well, what interesting happened in that 1828 year? Well, we see it's the first year that there's more P's than there are L's, which means that there's more people electing the president than the legislatures. Now, that's not because Andrew Jackson made it that way, but it does mean that his election to the presidency is going to be the first one where the average person got to have a say instead of just these elite legislatures from the states. So, looking at that, we then move on to 1832. It's mostly P still. In 1836, it's mostly P still. So when we're looking at that, is that evidence that Andrew Jackson is a Democratic president? That not Democrat as in the political party. Don't confuse yourself there. Democratic as in meaning, that he supports the will of the people in the government. Well, he was the first president to be elected mostly by the people and not the state legislatures. So that is evidence to suggest that he is, he's promoting democratic values in the United States. So now we've kind of looked at it. We kind of got the idea of what this is about. Now we have to fill out the document analysis sheet. The document analysis sheet is going to be taken for a grade. So when you're done, you're going to have to submit it to me. You do it in the Google Docs. So here's how you fill it out. So the first thing you got to do is Democratic document, letter or number. Well, these are all letters. So you'll have a letter for each one of this. This says document A right at the top. So all you have to do is write or type in that spot, document A. Then the next spot says source. Okay, so we kind of need to know what our sources are, particularly in today's society, right? Where you look online and half the posts out there are Wikipedia. You don't know that you can trust them, right? So we got to get in the practice of checking our sources. So when you look here at document A, right at the top it says source, and it says adopted from the historical statistics of the United States. So you just take that and put it in the source spot. So do this real quick. I'm writing it out by hand. You can do that and take a picture and send it to me. Most of you have been sending stuff, yes, typed out as a Google Doc, so that's fine. That's probably the easier way. But if you got to take a picture, that's fine. I'm going to abbreviate here. You need to write out the whole thing, but for the purposes of keeping this video relatively short, I'm just going to abbreviate it. I'm going to write historical statistics right there. Then the next spot you got to fill it is primary or secondary source. Well, the primary, you got to know what the difference between a primary source and a secondary source is. A primary source is like a first-hand account from the time period being discussed. So it could be like a journal article from Andrew Jackson or a letter from Andrew Jackson to somebody else, but it's got to be from the time period and needs to be original. It could be a newspaper article from the time period. Right? That makes it a primary source. A secondary source is somebody else's analysis of what happened. So it could be a current book that's written about the topic. It could be a current newspaper article that's written about a topic in the past, something along those lines. So when we look at document A here, well, one of the first, look at the source. That's going to tell you whether it's primary or secondary. Well, as a part of the source, it's got the year right here. Well, that says 1975. So this time period being discussed is the early 1800s. So it's not from the time period, which means it is secondary. So you just, in the primary secondary source, just type in secondary, and there you have it. Now, all those are going to be worth, a couple points. The big points for this assignment are going to come from the main idea and whether or not this is evidence that it's, Andrew Jackson is Democratic or undemocratic. So what's the main idea? Well, you got to do two things here. Pay close attention. So first of all, you got to tell me what it is, right? But then you have to tell me why it's significant, right? That's where a lot of kids kind of fall apart. It's easy to tell me what it is because in document A, the header of the chart says methods of electing the president. So what you would write here, the easy part is just tell me what it is. This is a chart discussing how the president is elected. Now, that's the easy part, right? What is going to be a little bit more difficult is telling me why it's significant. Well, why is it significant for discussing whether or not Andrew Jackson is Democratic or undemocratic, right? We've already defined democracy, which means that, the promoting the will of the people within the government. So how is this important, this document A, important when discussing democracy as a topic? Well, it shows that Andrew Jackson was the first president elected mostly by the will of the people and not elite state legislatures, right? So you would write all this down. And now I'm just pretending to write this down because that's too much to write for this short video. But I would just write, this chart shows that Andrew Jackson is the first president to be elected mostly by the will of the people and not the elite state legislatures. All right, period. Boom. There you go. You do those two things, what it is and why is it significant in regards to whether or not Andrew Jackson promoted democracy or hindered democracy. Right? Then the last step is this document evidence that Andrew Jackson was Democratic or undemocratic? Well, we've already talked about that. You just write Democratic. And again, that doesn't mean the political party. Don't confuse this. It means, did he promote democracy or did he hinder democracy? Right? You don't want to send me a paper talking about which political party he was in. That is not what we're doing here. Did he help promote the will of the people or did he hinder the will of the people being reflected in government? So This is very important that I'm even not even going to write Democratic. I'm going to write promoted a democratic society. That way it doesn't confuse me. You can just write Democratic or undemocratic. That's fine, but I don't want to be confused. So this is important because when this label here, right, is what you're going to use to reference later on. Because after you do all your research, you're going to decide, well, what do I want to write my paper about? Do I want to write it about Andrew Jackson being Democratic or being undemocratic? Well, you can, once you make that decision, then you just go back in and say, okay, I'm going to write about how Andrew Jackson promoted democracy. Remember, there's no right or wrong answer. It's only going to be graded based on, how you defend your argument. So I'm deciding to write this about how Andrew Jackson promoted democracy. I'm just going to go in and I'm going to circle all the documents that I had that say Jackson promoted democracy. And then those are the documents that I'm going to reference in my paper. I'll make a separate video on exactly how it is you're going to write the paper, but you're going to need to be able to cite sources. And it's going to be really easy. I know document A is pro-democracy. I'm going to write one whole paragraph about this document. I'll cite it within the paper, and boom, you're done. So this sheet is going to be super important that you have this completed before you start writing your essay. I'll give you some time to work on this, but you definitely are going to want to make sure that you get it absolutely completed before you start writing your essay. All right, that's it. If you have any questions, feel free to email me or schedule an individual meeting on Google Meets. Like I said, this is going to be, or Zoom, this is going to be one of the biggest assignments for the entire semester. It's going to be pretty difficult to do well in this class if you don't accomplish this assignment. I'm going to break it up into lots of different parts for you, so it's not all due at one time. But if you have any questions, you need to make sure you ask or set up an individual meeting time. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day.